Yo, Kpaceguy here. What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to make your subwoofers sound better. But before we do that, I'm going to make a deal with you guys. If you're watching this video right now and you are not subscribed to the channel, I am getting really close to 30,000 subscribers. So here's the deal we're going to make. If I say at least one thing that helps you in this video to make your subwoofer sound better, you owe me a subscription. Deal? Nice. Let's get to the video. So I understand that my viewers kind of vary. I have some intermediate people, I have some beginners, I have some true audiophiles. So this tip, or these tips altogether, are gonna help you regardless of how many subs you have, and regardless of if you're a newbie or you've been in the hobby for a while. I'm gonna start off with more basic tips first, and we're going to get more and more intermediate. So as the video goes on, these tips will be harder to do, but they will give you back the most improvement. So let's start off with the first one, and it's obvious. It's placement. Subwoofer placement is so important, and arguably you can't do any of the steps after this if you don't have good placement. And what do we mean by good placement? Well, we want to make sure that where we decide to put our subwoofer is a spot that's going to sound good where we sit. There are a lot of tips to make sure you have good placement, but the first one I like to follow the most is to keep my subs out of a corner. Now you can put them in a corner if they're smaller, because sometimes it does help a smaller sub sound a little bit bigger than it is, but most subs are capable nowadays. And so putting a sub in a corner, tucked in a corner behind maybe your furniture or a desk or an end table, can cause you some problems. It can cause muddy bass, it can cause you bloated bass, it could accentuate bad notes in the sub, it could cause boundary gain issues, meaning the corner is amplifying your sub in a negative way. So pulling it away from a corner usually yields you the most cleanest, smoothest bass response. Now you may like loud and boomy bass, but a lot of people don't. So if you pull your subs out of the corner or away from the wall, a little more into the room, you may get a little less volume out of your sub, but what you get in return is a much cleaner sound. Now, to piggyback on the whole placement conversation, there's also another way that you can figure out if your sub's in a good spot or not, and that's to switch spots with your sub. Now, this is an old wise tale. It still works today. It's not the best method, but it will get your foot in the door, and that's called the Subwoofer Crawl, where you put your sub in your seat and then you sit where you think you want the sub to be. You can get on your hands and knees or just bend down in places where you think you would like to have your sub. What I like to do is take maybe some painter's tape or some kind of marker where you can mark where you've been, go around the room and listen to a song that has a nice bass line that you're familiar with. If you put your sub in your seat where you sit and crawl around the outside of your room against the wall, you will start to hear different bass response. You'll see that some spots sound really boomy and unwanted, some sound really anemic, lacking of bass, and then some sounds kind of in the middle, really smooth, not too bad. Well, you want to crawl around and mark each spot where you like, oh, that sounded good, oh, that sounded good, that sounded good too. So then go back and see out of those few you've marked, which ones sound the best, and that's most likely a good starting point for your subwoofer placement. All right, brush your elbows off and dust your knees off. We're done crawling around the living room. What we're gonna do now is make sure that our volume levels are adequate, not too high, not too low. What we're gonna need for this is some sort of SPL meter. I have one from Amazon that's $25. There's many different types. Do you want an SPL meter that can measure low frequencies and you can read them? They're not too fast on the microphone. I have videos on this if you wanna see some. What you wanna do is take your measurement tool, your SPL meter, and put it in your listening position. And you want to see how loud your speakers are. In your receiver or preprocessor, you most likely have a menu where you can play a test tone, also known as pink noise. You want to turn the volume up to 0 dB on your receiver or AV processor. We call that reference level. You want to turn that volume up to 0 dB on your receiver or preprocessor and measure your subs to see how loud they are. We want them to be about 75 to 80 dB. What that means to you is that your subs are playing at a level that matches the rest of your speakers. If you have multiple subs, you want to do this for each and every sub that you have. If you don't have a pink noise setting in your receiver, you can download an app on your phone and play it through Bluetooth, or you can go to YouTube and type in pink noise and play a 0 dB pink noise test, and you can do it this way. But the goal is to make sure that your subs are not too loud or too soft in comparison with the rest of your actual active speakers, like your front left, front right, center, so on and so forth. I have a more in-depth video on SPL meters and how to measure levels if you want to really see how to do this. So those are 3 beginner tips that should be easy for most people, but now we're going to step up into more intermediate level type of calibrations and getting our subs dialed in. And we're going to start with phase, speaker phase. If you don't know what speaker phase is, I have plenty of videos on what is speaker phase. If you type in Kpaceguy speaker phase, it's going to come up with all my videos I've ever made about speaker phase. And trust me, they'll help you out if you're not sure. But let's assume that you have a general idea of what speaker phase is. Speaker phase makes sure that your subs and all your speakers are playing together, not against each other. When your speakers are out of phase, it's meaning that your subs, in this case, are canceling each other out. They're not moving in the same direction. So if you have a song and you have a bass line that's going bum, 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 you want your subwoofers to go bum, bum, bum. But if they're out of phase, one may go out while another one goes in. So it's going bum, bum, bum. And that will cause what we call a cancellation or a null, a lack of bass essentially. So if you have more than one sub, this can be a big issue. Or if you have tower speakers that produce a good amount of bass on their own, you may be out of phase with your subwoofer. So you want to check phase. If you want to know more about phase, I have a playlist down below. Now, some of you guys may not be a fan of this, and I apologize if you're not, but this may help you, especially if you have hardwood floors or maybe tile, whatever. This might help you. Now, a lot of you guys out there like to feel the bass in your chest, and I'm one of those people too. When a grenade gets thrown or there's thunder in the sky, I want to hear it and I want to feel it. It's kind of cool when the whole room vibrates, but that's not always good for sound. So you may look into isolation feet, meaning you can put really thick feet underneath your subwoofer to keep from vibrating the floor and sending those vibrations all around the room. But why would I want to do that? Well, when you vibrate things around the room, you kind of take away from that clean bass sound. Things vibrate at different frequencies. If you have a picture frame rattling against the wall, or you have light fixtures rattling in the ceiling, when you have your bass moderately high, you start to hear that more than you hear the bass. It kind of distracts you more than you thinking it's cool. So if you put isolation feet underneath your sub, it decouples the sub from the floor. It raises the sub up off the floor just a little bit and keeps the bass nice and tight to your ears, but keeps it out of your walls and disturbing your neighbors and rattling things like that. Now, again, you can't stop all vibrations. Bass is a huge, long, slow wave that will rattle everything around it, but you can at least keep it from going through your floor and keep the shaking down to a minimum. You'll find that your bass sounds tighter and it stops on a dime, it moves on a dime in comparison to having it rattle everything around your room. The issue with vibration is that when something rattles, when the bass stops, you still hear the rattle for a slight second after the bass stops, and that's what we want to avoid. All right, we're cooking with grease, so we're going to keep it moving. We want to make sure our crossover is correct. And again, I have tons of videos on what is crossover, how to set crossover, how to set subwoofer crossover. I have how to set speaker crossover. I have tons of videos on crossover, so again, I won't go through it in this video, but you want to make sure your crossover is correct. You want to make sure the conversation between your main speakers and your subwoofers is correct. For example, if I have tower speakers behind me that only get about 80 hertz, I want my subs to also be crossed over around 80 hertz. I want my subs to handle the bass that my main speakers can't. So what's an example of a wrong crossover? Well, again, let's say my tower speakers only dig down to 80 hertz, meaning once it gets too low, there's no more output, there's no more bass. The role of a sub is to fill in what your main speakers can't do. But if you have your subs crossover too low, there will be a hole of no bass. So if my speakers stop at 80 and I have my crossover on my sub at 40, well, 40 through 80, there's a giant hole of no sound because my crossover is incorrect. Another example of incorrect crossover is the vice versa. Let's say that my tower speakers get down to 80 hertz, but I have my subwoofer crossover at 200 hertz. So my sub's playing 200 hertz down to 10 or 15 or whatever, and so are my speakers. They're playing a 200 down to 80. So now I have my sub and my speakers kind of blasting me with all this bass, and it's not very tasteful. There's too much of it, or it's discolored, or it's out of phase, things like that. You want to get your crossover correct so that you have a smooth conversation between your speakers and your subs. Your speakers want to say, oh, I got this, I got this. Oh wait, it's getting a little bit too much for me to handle. Here, subwoofer, take this frequency and you play it because you're better at it than I am. You want that conversation to be smooth. If your speakers are both playing the same frequencies when they shouldn't, you're going to cause yourself a lot more issues than you are helping. I promise. All right, there are tons more intermediate type of things we can do for our subs, but let me go ahead and jump into more of the audiophile, those who really care about home theater, just a few of them, right? And of course, we can't go through this video without mentioning calibration. It's so important. Not just your receiver's calibration. Your receiver will do all it can for you, but you want to go behind your receiver and make changes that either it got wrong or maybe it's not capable of performing. So for example, I recently got into the world of mini DSP. I have a DSP in my car, and what it does is allows you to play around and change the parameters of your sound so that things complement each other and they work together beyond what your receiver can do. So a mini DSP allows you to go in and see what your subwoofers is doing. You can time align your subwoofers. You can check your speaker's phase. You can change the volume of your speakers. You can set a parametric equalizer, meaning you can change dedicated frequencies depending on your needs. Mini DSPs may sound expensive. They kind of are. They're in the upper 200s. And if you have multiple subs, well, oh well, because they have multiple outputs. So you only really need one. But they really unlock some hidden features that your receiver and preprocessor most likely can't do. And it'll greatly help your subwoofers perform better than you have ever imagined. So having 3 subs in my small room, a DSP has been more than helpful because it makes sure that all of my subs are playing nice with each other. If you have multiple subs, you may think, oh great, more subs equals more bass, but usually that's not true. More subs equals more calibration necessary is probably what happens, because just because you have more subs doesn't mean that they're playing together. It doesn't mean that you're not canceling each other out. For example, I went to a friend's house and he had 4 subs in his room and it sounded terrible. It sounded worse than if he only had 1. And that's because it wasn't calibrated correctly. But if you have a DSP, you can go through each individual sub, change some things, time align, parametric EQ. You can see a graph so you can see what things are doing, and you can make adjustments so that all of your subs are playing at their peak performance at the same time. So you really want to look into calibration if you have more than 1 sub and you're serious about your bass. Now, me personally, I think this is equally as important as calibration is, and that is acoustic treatment, specifically treatment that handles low frequencies. There are things like bass traps, diffusers, things like that that will help with mid bass and low bass. A lot of people just treat low bass, but mid bass is still bass, and it's something that you want to take care of. In my home theater, I have tons of acoustic panels that do different things. My biggest panels that I have in my room handle the mid bass, 200 hertz, 300 hertz, in that whole realm, and it helps keep things from being too bloated, muffled, a little too exposed, a little too, just it keeps everything nice and tight. And so there are different types of panels that treat different types of frequencies. So if you want to really clean up your bass on top of calibration, you want to get acoustic panels that are going to treat your problem area. So if you have a bad muddy bass, well, you want to get panels that treat mid bass. If you have really bad echo, well, you want to get panels that treat high frequencies. You want to get diffusers, you want to get ceiling panels, you want to put them in the right spots. And again, I have videos about acoustic panels if you want to learn more. But that is arguably just as important as calibration itself. Calibration will only be so good as your room, so make sure you don't skimp out on your acoustic treatment. Guys, there are tons of other things, beginner, intermediate, and experienced things that I can say about subwoofers, but the video is already long as it is, so I'm going to leave it there and let you guys down below in the comment section leave us your tips on getting good subwoofer performance. What did you do in your home theater to take your subs from to Let me know that down below in the comment section. Hit that like button, and remember, if something helped you, you owe me a subscription. We'll see you guys in the next video. Kpaceguy out. Peace.